300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Wednesday morning. A lot to discuss in basketball. The 76ers locking up Joel Embiid, Jamal Adams, with the Seattle Seahawks becoming the highest paid safety in the NFL. And even Cade Cunningham weighs in on the LeBron MJ discussion. I'll touch on that. But first, we start with some of the big news that was dropped yesterday, literally in the middle of the day. Another Woj bomb. The NBA released its marquee and notable games from opening week to Christmas Day for this upcoming NBA season. And it's interesting because just when you thought it was still in the middle of summer, obviously we're starting to get back into the fall a little bit. Some schools are starting to open up, but it seemed like this was kind of a dead period a little bit. Not much was going on. We were kind of just going through lollygagging through the summer. And then all of a sudden, this NBA season is released. The opening week, the opening day games are released. The Christmas Day games are released. And one of the things that I've always admired about the NBA and the NFL in particular is that they've always found a way to capture people's attention. They've always managed to capture a room, to capture an audience, no matter what the season is, whether it's the preseason, whether it's midseason, whether it's postseason, whether it's the off season. They always manage to drop different information to keep their organization, to keep their league relevant, to remain relevant. And that's something that's extremely hard to do. Baseball has struggled to do it. Other big-time sports have struggled to do it. But the NBA and the NFL always manage to keep their name in the mix, in the fold, in talk shows, on SportsCenter, no matter the time. And this is a perfect example because maybe there's about a month period for both the NFL and the NBA every single year where maybe at that point it's a little bit barren and there isn't much news to discuss. But with the exception of that, for about a month after the 2 weeks that a Super Bowl champion is crowned or an NBA title champion is officially crowned, that's about the only time during the year where these two organizations don't make any type of headline. After Tampa Bay and the Bucks had their Super Bowl parade, maybe there was 3 weeks to a month before the NFL released its new schedule. After the Milwaukee Bucks won their championship, maybe there was 3 weeks after their celebration parade that this information gets dropped. So we think back to, hey, after Bucks and Brady won, 3 weeks later, they announced Cowboys Bucks on opening day. They tease when New England and Tom Brady are going to be meeting up when Brady's returning back to New England. They always find a way to stay relevant. And so when the NBA announced its schedule release yesterday, at least for opening week and for Christmas Day, it always gets the juices flowing again, gets me excited, gets me animated and amped up for this upcoming season. I already can't wait, given all the offseason moves, all the frenzies that have been created between different fan bases. This is what gets fans excited about the upcoming season. And so for me, here's what they announced yesterday. For opening week, the opening game, the first game to commence the NBA season, Brooklyn Nets at the Milwaukee Bucks, and then the Golden State Warriors at the LA Lakers on opening day. Followed by that, you've got the Boston Celtics and the Knicks. Two teams in the Eastern Conference should be exciting. Denver Nuggets and Phoenix. Jamal Murray should be back and healthy, going up against a team that is really a comparable opponent in the Phoenix Suns, just reaching the NBA Finals. Then you got the Mavericks and the Hawks, the hypothetical scenario with Luka and Trae Young. Those two teams opting in different directions. Fast forward a couple years, where are their organizations now? Clippers and Warriors, Brooklyn Nets at the 76ers on that Friday. The two best teams record-wise in the Eastern Conference last year, and the Phoenix Suns and the Lakers a rematch of the first round of last season. And then the Christmas Day games, they announced the 5 games, which statistically and viewership-wise is always the highest-rated individual day for basketball in the regular season. You've got the Hawks at the Knicks. You got the Celtics and the Bucks. You've got the Warriors and the Suns, Mavericks and Jazz, and the Brooklyn Nets and the LA Lakers. So I wanted to preview what, to me, are my top 3 most highly anticipated games based on that release. Based on the games that they were released yesterday, as far as opening week, as far as Christmas Day, these are the top 3 games that I am most looking forward to seeing already. And again, we're 2.5 months out, still the middle of the offseason for these teams, for these players, but I already cannot wait. So at number 3, the Atlanta Hawks at the New York Knicks. Listen, the atmosphere was absolutely electric between these two teams last year. It's a rematch of a first-round playoff matchup in the Eastern Conference last year. Though the series only went 5 games, again, the electricity in Madison Square Garden, the volume decibels and the volume levels that it reached in MSG was incredible. And for a city that was starving for some star power, was starving for relevancy in the NBA, now you get things started off on Christmas with a rematch of that first round matchup, and you've got the latest villain in Madison Square Garden, Trae Young, returning back to the place where he hushed the crowd. It's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be absolutely sensational. And again, it's been so long. It's been so long since the Knicks have been relevant during a Christmas Day game. It's been several years. In fact, they haven't won a Christmas Day game in over a decade since the start of the lockout 2011 condensed season, when they beat the Celtics on opening day. That opened on Christmas. That was the last time that the Knicks were even really relevant and won on a Christmas Day game. So now they got another game at MSG. That should be sensational. The crowd's going to be really pumped up for that. At number 2, the Brooklyn Nets at the Milwaukee Bucks for opening day. It doesn't get much better than this. Not only are these the two powerhouses and the two heavy favorites in the Eastern Conference, the Brooklyn Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks, you got the defending champs, the Milwaukee Bucks, playing against a team in the Brooklyn Nets that is honestly kind of seeking some retribution for how they lost to the Bucks last year in 7 games. They're going to be fully healthy. They'll be fully loaded with James Harden, Kyrie Irving, KD, going up against Giannis, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton. And not only that, it literally is the very first game to start the NBA season. It literally commences the 2021-2022 season. That always gets me extremely excited. So I cannot wait for that, a potential Eastern Conference finals preview. And then, of course, that leads to number 1, which is going to be no surprise to anyone. I know that everyone was excited to see this one. The Brooklyn Nets at the LA Lakers on Christmas Day. This will be the highest rated regular season game in the NBA this year, no question about it. I don't even have to look at the rest of the schedule. I already know that this is it. And to be honest, this is one of the most highly anticipated regular season games and regular season Christmas Day games that we've ever had in the NBA. When I think about Christmas Day games, some of the most highly anticipated games, I have to think back to 2004 when Shaquille O'Neal and the Miami Heat were facing Kobe and the Lakers for the first time since that trade. That was an epic 104-102 overtime win for the Miami Heat. That was a great Christmas Day game. You have in 2010-2011 season when LeBron joined the Miami Heat for the first time and the Miami Heat were taking on Kobe and the defending champ Lakers. That was a highly anticipated game. 2016 against the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors. The season after the Cavs won, KD joins the Warriors and they go to Cleveland on Christmas Day. Kyrie Irving hit the game winner over Klay Thompson. That was an epic Christmas Day game. This stacks up with that, if not surpassing that. The star power that's involved in a game like this with first of all, Russ and AD and LeBron, Kyrie, KD, and James Harden. You've got former All-Stars in Carmelo and Blake Griffin and the supporting cast in Staples Center on Christmas Day. It's going to be absolutely electric. And again, an NBA Finals preview. These are the two heavyweights and title favorites in the NBA coming into this year. The Brooklyn Nets are the prohibitive favorites in the East, and the Lakers are the prohibitive favorites in the West. First opportunity, first glance to take a look at where both of these two teams stand midway through the season and how they stack up against one another. I'm assuming and praying, knocking on wood, that they're going to stay healthy, because last year was we really were deprived of what could have been a good regular season matchup. LeBron wasn't really playing. James Harden and Kyrie Irving really weren't playing. It was really KD and Anthony Davis and Kuzma, and that's just not going to get it done for me. That's not going to cut it. So that's what I'm most excited about. Those are the top three games that I'm most looking forward to seeing come this 2021-2022 NBA season. Thank you for dropping this on us in the middle of August. I needed that in my life. Absolutely needed that in my life. And speaking of things that I need in my life, I need a little bit more Davion Mitchell. Davion Mitchell was shining for the Sacramento Kings, not only yesterday, but throughout the entire Summer League, and they capped it off, and it culminated with a Summer League title, which is the first time that the Sacramento Kings have won the Summer League title since 2014. They went undefeated, had a perfect record in the Summer League, went 5-0, and this is kind of a storyline that has flew under the radar for the past several weeks. It's not something that people have talked about. They blew out the Celtics 100-67. I don't really care about the final score. I don't really care about that at all. But what I care about, and let me first give a shout out to Lewis King. Congrats to him. Shout out to him. 21 points in the Summer League championship game, winning the Summer League championship game MVP. Jamias Ramsey, 16 points. Good for him. Hope they both make the Sacramento Kings roster. They played really well. But I've been raving about Davion Mitchell, and I've been gushing over Davion Mitchell since before the draft at Baylor. I've absolutely been extremely bullish about him since before he declared for the NBA draft out of Baylor. I love everything that this guy is made of. I love everything that he stands for. He doesn't care about the stats. He gets after you defensively, and is one of those few guys that I think entering this draft that is going to surpass expectations. They're always, as often as we think top 10 picks, and this is a guy who's drafted 9th overall by the Kings in this past year's draft. There are always guys in the top 10 that kind of disappoint us, that leave us with a little bit to be desired. And this is not going to be one of those guys. This is going to be someone who exceeds our expectations. And again, if you look purely at the numbers in the Summer League, offensively, it may not jump out to you, 11 points and 6 assists per game, but he shot 47% from the three-point line in 5 games across the Summer League. And the reason why I've been so bullish about this guy is, again, because of how unique a specimen he is on both sides of the floor. This is a guy who was the 2021 National Defensive Player of the Year in college basketball, was an All-American, a national champion. He's a winner. This is a guy who's literally won at every single level. AAU, high school state tournament, at Baylor, winning a national championship, now winning a summer league championship. He's the perfect hybrid to me between Donovan Mitchell and Jrue Holiday. Davion Mitchell 6'2", Donovan Mitchell 6'1", Jrue Holiday is 6'3", but he can lock you up in ways that we haven't seen in quite a long time. There are a lot of good defenders in the NBA, but there are seldom guys who have the size, who have the muscle, who have the physicality that this guy possesses on both ends of the floor. You have specialists that can focus on one side of the floor. Rarely do you see guys that can do it on both sides. So he's got the explosiveness and the shooting ability of Donovan Mitchell. His form is very similar to Donovan Mitchell. He can pull up off the dribble threes. He rises up the way that Donovan Mitchell can. He can explode to the basket, so he's extremely fast. But then he's similar to Jrue Holiday in that he's willing to go pick up the opposing guard's best player full court. National title game. He picked up Jalen Suggs full court the entire game, akin to Jrue Holiday picking up Chris Paul full court in every game of the NBA Finals, or at least since games 2 and on. And if you think this isn't really relevant, I want you to think about what he did to Peyton Pritchard yesterday. Now, I'm not going to go on record saying that Peyton Pritchard is a Hall of Fame player. Of course, I'm not going to say that. But he was crushing it in the summer league for the Boston Celtics. This was a guy who was averaging over 20 points a game, over 51% shooting from the floor, 58% shooting from three, and only turning the ball over about once per game. And when Davion Mitchell was guarding Peyton Pritchard yesterday, for some context, he held him to 4 points on 0 for 4 shooting from three, 2 for 6 shooting from the field, and he forced 4 turnovers. He was stuck to Peyton Pritchard like gum underneath a subway rail. The guy would not move. He was absolutely glued to him from start to finish, and it threw Peyton Pritchard off the entire game. He finished with 6 points on 3 for 9 shooting. That's it. When he was averaging those previous numbers. Excuse me. So the reason I bring that up is because there are certain traits that can elevate and propel guys at the next level, and that can translate to the next level. Defense is one of them. You're a really elite defender. That goes a long way in the NBA. When you've got the combination of being able to pick up guys full court, you're a great defender, and you can shoot the three ball at an elite clip like that, at a 47% clip. This is a guy that also shot over 40% at Baylor in college. The guy's work ethic is absolutely tremendous. We heard stories and reports about how he was getting in 2 workouts prior to the Sacramento Kings' official summer league workouts. So essentially 3 workouts per day. He's been doing that every single day he's been with the Sacramento Kings. So he possesses that true desire to be better, that drive and that desire to compete, to work, to want to be great every single day. And as much as we want to praise other guys for their work ethic and we kind of pay them lip service and say, yes, this guy works hard and this guy works hard and they're all putting in a lot of work this offseason. Show me, don't tell me. I want to see. And Davion Mitchell, he embodies all of that. And the Kings have really hit actually recently on their guards. When you look at the guys that they've drafted recently, they've hit on a number of them. You got De'Aaron Fox from a couple years ago. Tyrese Halliburton was a nice pickup for the Kings, had a good rookie season last year. And now you've got Davion Mitchell, who's a leader, who can be your backbone, the guts, the heart of your team. He wants to be the example. He wants to set the tone. And for a defense that has struggled and has really been putrid in the NBA the past several years with the Sacramento Kings, this is a guy that I think can come in and immediately put the clamps on and help elevate them. There's a reason why the Sacramento Kings in the summer league were so incredible defensively. They had a margin of like outscoring teams by 34 points based on their defense. The single season or single game record in the NBA was like a 33-point margin, and they did it by 34 with their defense. I think that the three of them can play together at the same time. There will be moments where the three of them can play together. De'Aaron Fox, Davion Mitchell, and Tyrese Halliburton. And I think that he's going to be an all-star in this league in a few years. I truly believe that Davion Mitchell will be an NBA all-star in the coming years because, yes, he's 6'2", so he's a little bit smaller, but he, again, has that rare motor and that rare skill set that I think can really translate. Already an elite defender, so he's going to be entering the league as an elite defender and as an elite shooter. And those are the types of skill sets that if you're an NBA team, you automatically have to insert him into a lineup, whether it's the starting lineup, whether it's coming off the bench. He will see game action. He will be out there on the floor. He has to. He's extremely valuable on both sides. So I just love everything that he's made of. And again, you could play all three of them together. Tyrese Halliburton is 6'5". So theoretically, he could kind of play a small forward role. So he's just been a winner everywhere, and he's going to force his way onto the court. And I am extremely high on Davion Mitchell. I love everything about him, about his play, what he stands for. I cannot wait to see what he does at the next level. So we'll see. So the Philadelphia 76ers, finally in the news for the right reasons. They have officially, I guess they're finalizing a deal to sign Joel Embiid to a supermax extension, 4 years, $196 million. So now that keeps him in Philadelphia through the 2026-2027 season, which is the next 6 years. And over the course of that, he will be making a fully guaranteed $261 million. There are no more provisions or stipulations that protect the 76ers in case of a catastrophic, knock on wood, catastrophic lower back, foot injury. There are no advantages and outs for the 76ers at this point, not in this contract. Joel Embiid will make every single dollar of it. And to be honest, he's deserving of that money. And the fact that he negotiated this deal by himself it takes a lot of gumption. It takes a lot of cojones. And from that perspective, happy for him that he's continuing to earn his money. He is worth every single bit of it. Not to mention he played through a torn right meniscus in the playoffs last year. Didn't need surgery, just missed one game. So hopefully he's trending in the right direction as far as health is concerned. Now, as far as an individual talent, and it kind of brings up the question, well, will the Philadelphia 76ers be able to win a championship during this extension? Now, as an individual talent, there's no question that Joel Embiid individually is a good enough and a talented enough NBA player to win the 76ers a title. I do believe that. He is good enough. He's got the goods to be the best player on a championship team. We've seen how he's been able to lead the 76ers 4 straight postseasons. And this is a guy who last year had a career year. 28.5 points, over 10.5 rebounds, about 3 assists, over 50% shooting from the floor, 38% from the three, 86% from the free throw line, second best PR in the league last year behind Nikola Jokic. Finished second in the MVP voting. Behind Jokic, he would have been the NBA's MVP if he maybe played in 10 more games. So you look at the accolades This guy's got the whole package. 4-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA player, 3-time All-Defensive player. So when you look at his skill set, there aren't any weaknesses in his game. There isn't anything he can't do. He can post you up. He can hit the mid-range. He can extend you out to the three-point line. He shoots the three ball extremely well. He makes his free throws. He's a great rebounder, a versatile defender, an elite defender, especially in today's NBA when normally 7-footers, and he's a legit 7-footer, are liabilities when they're switched out onto guards. He's not a liability. So again, sure, his motor can maybe be a little bit better each year, and his basketball acumen can increase. I think he can take more guys into the post more frequently. Sure, those are ways that he can get better, and I'm sure he's working on that in the offseason. But as an individual talent, absolutely. No, I totally believe he's good enough. But the roster as it's currently constructed, with this core principle and core foundation of Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and Tobias Harris, no, they will not win an NBA title. This was the year to do it. And we saw what happened to Ben Simmons. He's absolutely psychologically scarred and traumatized. And if he were to return to the 76ers, I think it would only exacerbate it. He needs a new location. And so if they don't trade Ben Simmons and they try and keep him around, or they don't get enough enticing offers for him, and they try and run it back with this team, no, they're not going to win an NBA title. It just won't happen. And it's not for Joel Embiid not elevating his level of play. I read out the stats that he posted during the regular season. In the postseason against the Hawks, his numbers ticked up. He averaged 30 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, a steal a game. He played well in the postseason, but again, he needed Ben Simmons to come with him. He needed Tobias Harris to play like an all-star. So if those are the 3 guys in company that you're trying to roll with for the next 3-4 years, or 6 years in Joel Embiid's case, no, you're not going to win a title. Here's the other reason why you wouldn't win a title. Because say what you want about Joel Embiid's age, saying, oh, he's 27 years old, he's hitting the prime of his career. Age-wise, technically, yes, he is entering the prime of his career. But health-wise, I hope he stays healthy, but I don't know what the next 3 to 4 years are going to look like for him. Will his knees hold up? Will his legs hold up? Will his back hold up? I hope it does, because he's a transcendent player and a transcendent talent. But the reality is, you look at the best teams in the NBA, and while they're older, the window isn't necessarily just 1 year. You look at the Lakers. Sure, LeBron is aging, but he's still probably going to remain there for the next 2 to 3 years with Anthony Davis, who, yes, is brittle as well, but it's not like the Lakers maybe won't be able to pair him with someone else. You got Westbrook here. Maybe they find someone else. The Brooklyn Nets, Harden and KD are 31 and 32 respectively. So they're going to age extremely well because their games don't rely on their athleticism. They are prolific scorers and absolute snipers, lethal jump shooters and three-point shooters. That's something that can translate later in your career, that can keep you relevant. So who's to say that the Brooklyn Nets aren't going to stick around for a little bit? The Bucks just won the NBA title. They're not going anywhere. Giannis, quite frankly, is better than Joel Embiid, and he's younger, and he's 26, and he's healthier. And the Bucks have actually had the 76ers' number the last 3 years. They swept them in all 3 games last year. They beat them both times in 2020. And they've won 6 straight games over the 76ers dating back to the last 2.5 years. So I don't know if the 76ers can get over that hump either. And listen, the Celtics, the Hawks are continuing to get better, I think. They're going to retool with some different pieces in the West. The Warriors aren't going anywhere with Steph. You got Luka and the Mavs. Devin Booker and Phoenix just reached the NBA Finals. there are up-and-coming teams, Davion Mitchell and the Utah Jazz. There are a lot of elite teams that could still pose as roadblocks to the Philadelphia 76ers. So I wouldn't be convinced that they're just all of a sudden going to be good enough to win. However, I will say this. So again, the outlook for some of these other teams is extremely bright. However, if they can find their hands on a Damian Lillard or on a Bradley Beal, or they can acquire a bona fide superstar or superstar talent, or develop a player into a superstar during this time frame, then I'll retract my statement and I'll revise it and I'll amend it. Because then, yes, then they can win an NBA title. They get a guy like Damian Lillard on the roster with Joel Embiid, with Tobias Harris and that company, the cast of characters. Yeah, then that's a team that can legitimately win an NBA title. But the way that they're currently constructed right now, I don't see that happening. I just don't see that happening. So another guy's transitioning to the NFL. Another guy that also signed a massive extension with his respective team, Jamal Adams with the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks extended Jamal Adams 4 years, $70 million to make him the NFL's highest paid safety. It comes with a nice little $20 million signing bonus, $38 million fully guaranteed. And this is a guy that's been in contract disputes and in negotiations for 5 months now. And with it, he becomes the NFL's 17th highest paid defensive player. Actually, the 17th highest paid player, period, in the NFL. But this is what I wanted to focus on with Jamal Adams. Happy for him that he got his money. Whenever we think specifically about the NFL, oftentimes negotiations come down to 3 specific things. Comes down to your talent. Are you innately talented? Comes down to your production. How are you producing? Are you producing? What kind of production are you giving us? What's the value you're giving us? And 3, and this is most important, it comes down to timing. Are you the next guy that's lined up to get paid? That's what it comes down to. Those are the 3 main things. So if you take a look at all 3 of those things, talent, production, and timing, all of that worked in Jamal Adams' favor right now. When you look at talent, there's no question, absolutely no-brainer. Seattle Seahawks had to pay him. He's absolutely one of the best NFL safeties. And he's just 25 years old, so he's still in the prime of his career. He's just getting off his rookie contract. This is a guy who is big. He's physical. He's maybe the best safety at getting to the quarterback in the NFL. His ability to put pressure and sack quarterbacks from the safety position as a defensive back is extremely, extremely impressive. He might be the best at doing that in the NFL. So talent, check. Production, absolutely, he's produced. This is a guy who is an all-pro, Pro Bowler in 2019. In fact, he's been a Pro Bowler for 3 straight seasons. If you want to say, well, his production was a little bit down last year on total tackles, and could he be better on coverage? Absolutely. That's an area that he can work on. But even with that being said, this is still a guy who led the Seattle Seahawks in sacks with 9.5 sacks. Mind you, those 9.5 sacks not only were a career high, but it was a single season record for defensive back in NFL history, what he did from that position. So he led the team in sacks with 9.5 as a DB. He led the team in tackles for loss with 14. And he led the team in quarterback pressures with 30 as a defensive back. Mind you also that those 30 QB pressures were 14 better than the next closest defensive back in the NFL. So talent, check. Now production, check. Third and most important is timing. Who's the next guy? Who's the next guy to get paid? And Jamal Adams, fortunately for him, was the next guy in line to get paid. We see this all the time. That's simply what it comes down to. We see this all the time with the quarterbacks. How first it was Carson Wentz who cracked into the $30 million a year conversation. Then it was Jared Goff, or then it was actually Aaron Rodgers. Then it was Jared Goff. Then it was Russell Wilson. Then it was Deshaun Watson. Then we're seeing Dak Prescott in the 40s, Patrick Mahomes at $45 million. We just saw Josh Allen sign a huge contract extension. Lamar Jackson is working on one. I'm sure that it could eclipse Josh Allen's production, given that he actually won a league MVP. So the reason why the timing is so important is because it's not always about whether you are the best player at your position at said time. Because I don't think that anyone would say that Carson Wentz or Jared Goff were necessarily the best quarterbacks in the NFL at the time that they got paid. But that's the going rate. And they keep raising the bar higher and higher each time someone gets paid. That sets the new market value. That's the new market for a quarterback. So no one condemns the organization for doling out money because it's what they have to do to retain these guys, and they want to stay if they want to stay a little bit relevant. So I'm not saying that Jamal Adams is definitively the best safety in the NFL. I'm not saying that at all. Because certainly you can make an argument for him, but you can also make an argument for some other guys. Justin Simmons with the Broncos, Harrison Smith with the Vikings, Minkah Fitzpatrick with the Steelers, Derwin James with the Chargers. There are plenty of other guys that you might think are better players, but the reality is Jamal Adams just happened to be the next guy up. We just saw that Justin Simmons signed a contract this offseason that had made him the highest paid safety in the league, and Jamal Adams happened to be behind him. So he got more money. And now I'm sure the next guy that's going to get paid will eclipse that money, or at least eclipse the amount of fully guaranteed money. But there's also a fourth new factor that leads to a guy like Jamal Adams becoming the NFL's highest paid safety. And it's something that isn't discussed. I talked about the three: the talent, the production, and the timing, but there's a fourth one as well. And that is the importance to your star quarterback. We're living in a new age of stars in sports, and the player empowerment in the NFL, especially amongst the quarterbacks, is just beginning to burgeon. It's just beginning to grow. We're seeing the type of clout that these star quarterbacks have, their ability to wield power and, to be honest, and to insert themselves into more of the personnel decisions, to voice their opinions. They're feeling a lot more comfortable being able to voice their opinions and voice their input more frequently for any decision making, whether it's head coach, defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, this special teams guy, doesn't matter. They like inserting their opinion. So they've got a lot more say, a lot more clout, a lot more influence than they did. This is a new era that we're living in. And so quarterbacks are no longer just audibling and throwing footballs. We saw that case in point with Aaron Rodgers. He said enough is enough with the Packers. They've disrespected me. They haven't allowed me to be a part of personnel decisions. Well, that's going to change. And the Packers acquiesced, and due to Aaron Rodgers' request, essentially, they were able to re-sign Randall Cobb. They brought him back onto the roster. So Russell Wilson is a star quarterback. For several years, he had been kind of bottled up. He didn't voice any of his frustrations. He didn't publicly kind of say any disparaging remarks about the Seahawks organization. This was the first summer where he kind of put his foot in the ground and said, enough's enough. And he started voicing his frustrations about wanting to be a part of the personnel decision-making, to insert his opinion. And so a lot of this has to do with, hey, the organization wants to appease and coddle and cater to their star quarterback. They want to make them a little bit happier. And so Jamal Adams was a guy who Russell Wilson identified early on saying, I want to bring this guy back. He publicly vouched for him to return. He publicly vouched for the organization, for the Seahawks, to bring him back. So a lot of this has to simply do with just trying to make Russell Wilson a little bit happier and cater a little bit more to him. Not to mention, you gave up 2 first-round picks, a third-rounder, a guy in Bradley McDougall, and a fourth-round pick to acquire him. So if you weren't going to sign him long-term, then that would have been all for naught. That would have been a complete waste and a complete failure of assets, of managing your assets. And it's really the first and only big-time re-signing under the Pete Carroll and John Schneider era is signing Jamal Adams. So he obviously buttresses your defense. There aren't so many guys. You got Carlos Dunlap. There aren't so many guys that you have on the defensive side of the ball to replicate that Legion of Boom. You needed Jamal Adams in there to fortify that back line. And so, again, I'm glad that they didn't, because otherwise it would have been an utter waste. Really would have, in my opinion. So this was an interesting story. So Cade Cunningham, the number 1 overall pick in this past year's NBA draft, he weighed in on the LeBron MJ discussion. I'm sure people have already seen what he said. I'm sure it's caused a big ruckus at different barbershops, grocery stores, sports bars. Probably caused a lot of heated discussions, maybe some broken bottles as well. And so let me first say this. I grew up in Los Angeles, born in 1997. So my favorite player was this guy, Kobe Bryant. My favorite player, grew up in Los Angeles. He was obviously drafted by the Lakers in 1996. So for me, he was my favorite player. I've always thought that Kobe was the most skilled basketball player I've ever seen. He was my favorite player for the longest time, and he still is. But I always thought he was the most skilled basketball player I've ever seen. And LeBron, since I've been watching him, I've reached the conclusion that he's the greatest player that I've ever seen. Now, it doesn't mean that I think he's better than Jordan. It just means I wasn't alive to see Jordan play live basketball. So context matters. The time that you grew up watching basketball matters. And so when we think about Cade Cunningham and the comments that he made were, I've seen all the MJ stuff. The dude is different. I can't argue with the fact that you think he's the GOAT, but in my eyes, it is LeBron. So obviously people are going to freak out about these comments, and you're going to have the Michael Jordan supporters that are going to be in an uproar, and they're going to jeer Cade Cunningham on social media. And then conversely, you're going to have the LeBron fans that are going to laud and come to his defense and praise him. That's to be expected. But I think that what's really important here is the context. When did these guys play? What types of games do they have? What types of game does his game emulate and resemble? Before everyone just starts going to a frenzy and it turns into utter chaos. Because that matters. All that context matters. What size are you? How you play? What type of game do you have? Let's think about Cade Cunningham for a second. So this is a guy who's 19. He was the number 1 overall pick. He's 6'8", 220 pounds, taken number 1 overall. If you really think about it, the fact that he's choosing LeBron really isn't that surprising at all. Because why did Cade Cunningham get selected number 1 overall in this year's NBA draft? It wasn't because he was the absolute best scorer, the best offensive player, because that would be Jalen Green. It's because of the wide variety of elite skill sets that he possesses. At 6'8", he can score at an extremely efficient level. He can get to the basket. He's got great ball handling. He's got great vision. He's a great defender. That's why he was picked number 1 overall. He's got the most complete, well-rounded game out of this class, along with the fact that he's 6'8", and being able to still do all of this. That's why he got picked. Well, between Michael Jordan and LeBron James, who does that most remind you of? It's LeBron James. When you think about who's the best all-around basketball player, a lot of people gravitate towards LeBron versus Michael Jordan. So from that perspective, okay, who did he emulate? Who does his game model after? For Cunningham, it's LeBron. So it's not a shock that he is leaning towards LeBron in this discussion, because that's who his game models after. Now you look at, okay, well, Cade Cunningham, how old is he? Oh, he's 19 years old, which means that he was born in 2001. Well, in 2001, Michael Jordan was a shell of himself with the Washington Wizards. And LeBron James was entering the league in 2003 after Michael Jordan was retiring. So the only guy that Cade Cunningham grew up watching was LeBron. So you emulate and model his game, and the guy that you actually see live playing basketball is not MJ, but it's LeBron. Okay, so those are 2 reasons why you go with him. But the other thing is, again, not only did he grow up watching LeBron, he grew up watching LeBron in an era when everyone was claiming that he's the greatest of all time. You look at a sport like baseball. If you were to talk to the youth and kids playing baseball right now growing up, they would tell you that Mike Trout is the greatest baseball player of all time. And he very well may be. He possesses the skill set where you're not going to get much pushback. He is an absolutely phenomenal baseball player. And I'm not going to outright dispute that or argue that he's not the greatest of all time. But if you were to talk to baseball fanatics that are a bit older, that grew up watching more baseball players than just Mike Trout, well, you'd probably get a different answer. You'd probably get guys saying, maybe it's Willie Mays, maybe it's Ken Griffey Jr., maybe it's Babe Ruth. So the era that you're watching the baseball in, or the basketball for this matter, is extremely, extremely important. And then let's think about his size. Well, he's 6'8", and he's 220. So between Michael Jordan and LeBron, who does he most remind you of when it comes to the size? It's LeBron. LeBron 6'9", 250, if not weighs more. He's not a 6'6" shooting guard. He's a 6'8", big, stable, all-around basketball player. So it's not a surprise that he's gravitating towards LeBron. I mean, LeBron is 6'9" and is the quasi de facto point guard every single place he goes. It'd be different, and I'm sure that if I were to ask Jalen Green who's the greatest basketball player of all time, he'd probably say Kobe or MJ, because he's a 6'5" shooting guard and he's an absolutely prolific scorer. He's a bona fide scorer. That's what he was born to do. He'd probably even say Kobe because he's also 19. So he grew up right when Kobe was playing in his prime. He also didn't see Michael Jordan. So I bring that up just to say that before everyone start to crush and absolutely shred and trash Cade Cunningham, just remember that context matters here. That's extremely, extremely important. That the time, the era that you grew up playing can have an extremely big influence on which guy you're leaning towards. So to me, it's honestly not a big surprise at all that Cade Cunningham went with a guy like LeBron. They're both picked also number 1 overall. Michael Jordan was the 3rd overall pick. So, not surprising at all to me that the guy that he chose is the guy that he more resembles, more emulates, and models his game after. That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Finally, final topic of the day, my Malkin's moments, one of my favorite moments and topics of every single show that I do. Pick some of my favorite moments from the past couple days or over the weekend, depending on which show it is, if it's a Monday or Wednesday. And this Wednesday, I have a couple really, really special Malkin's moments that I wanted to touch on. So I'd mentioned that the Sacramento Kings, their summer league basketball team, they won their first summer league title since 2014. Now, their head coach, Bobby Jackson, has not only been the head coach of the Sacramento Kings summer league team, he's also the head coach of their G League affiliate team, the Stockton Kings. So this is a guy who's a former player for the Sacramento Kings. Okay. He spent 6 seasons with the Sacramento Kings. He won a 6th Man of the Year in 2003, which was the height of Sacramento's basketball, where he had the Chris Webber and the Vlade Divac and the Mike Bibby and the Peja Stojakovic. That was a really good Kings team. Just that era of basketball. So now you got Bobby Jackson winning 6th Man of the Year. And here he is as the head coach of not only so after he plays for the Sacramento Kings, he becomes an assistant coach for the Sacramento Kings. He's then elevated to being the head coach of their G League affiliate team, the Stockton Kings. Then he also assumes the responsibility and the roles of being the head coach of their summer league team. And now he wins a summer league title in 2021. I mean, this guy has been Sacramento through and through. He is absolutely beloved in that city. And it's just amazing that he has stuck around with the Sacramento organization and has been a part of the Sacramento roots for so long. And to see it culminate right now in a title, it's special for him. And speaking of being special with the Sacramento Kings, again, I alluded to this earlier. Big shout out to Louis King of the Sacramento Kings. He had a phenomenal tournament, phenomenal summer league, won the summer league MVP in the championship game, scoring 21 points, 5 steals. This is a guy who went undrafted out of Oregon in 2019. He's bounced around a couple different teams, and now he's trying to make a final roster spot with the Sacramento Kings, and it certainly helps when you've got performances like this. So those are the types of stories that I like hearing, is a guy like Louis King who's getting an opportunity. So big shout out to him. And then finally, in baseball, my final Malkin's moment goes to the Cincinnati Reds, Joey Votto, who reached 2,000 hits for his career. He finally eclipsed that 2,000 hit mark. That now makes him the 5th player in franchise history to reach that mark. Again, it used to be said, mind you, that baseball and actually hitting a baseball was the most difficult thing in sports. For the longest time, that's what was deemed the most difficult thing to do in baseball was to hit a baseball in sports. So big shout out to, again, Bobby Jackson, Louis King, and Joey Votto. They are this week's Malkin's Moments on a Wednesday. That's all the time that I got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to like, review, subscribe to all of my platforms. Subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Follow me across Twitter on at Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin on Twitter, JMalk97 on Instagram, all that jazz. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.